I am Suzanne Legrand, and this is The Case of the Missing Home. For those of you who have been following the case of the missing home, here's a quick recap of what has happened so far. A dancer I'd met a few times socially wrote me one day. She was looking for a new place to live, but every potential housing situation she found seemed to immediately fall apart. Would I consider being her shaman? I was flattered. I'd been journeying to the underworld for a number of years, but this was the first time anyone had sought me out and asked for my help. As if I were the real deal. Was I? The universe had delivered me an opportunity to find out. I knew what it was like to be in Joyce's situation, the desperation, the fear, and the reality of being on the edge of being homeless. I so longed to be helpful, to take what I'd learned to make someone's life better. This impulse had led me to be a teacher, but it had also gotten me into trouble. I didn't need to take a journey to the underworld to discover the reasons why Joyce was having such a hard time finding a place to live. Rising rents, shrinking rentals as homeowners turned their extra room into an Airbnb for weekend tourists. High-paying professional jobs reserved for the young and middle class, while minimum wage service jobs were reserved for everyone else. You could work for 40 hours or more a week and still not earn enough to pay market rent. Those were some of the outer world reasons for Joyce's housing instability. She came to me to help solve her problem. I agreed to help her look for the deeper, underlying emotional, spiritual, and psychological beliefs that, together with the outer circumstances, had created Joyce's reality, its patterns and possibilities. Shamans believe that to find a cure for what ails a person, you must go to the underworld, a place betwixt and between. Some shamans call it dream time. Carl Jung spoke of it as the collective unconscious. In popular imagination, the underworld is associated with criminals, shadowy monsters, and the unknown, which is always threatening. Hell, for those who believe that heaven is located somewhere above. I promised Joyce I would go to the underworld in search of insight, something that would help her to find a new home. There are risks involved in journeying to the underworld. You can get lost, for one thing. And if you aren't careful, you can succumb to the very disease you are trying to cure in another. At the moment, however, I had a stable place to live. Who would I be if I did not do what I could to help someone in need? It is late fall. There's a chill in the air as the days grow shorter and the season of darkness slowly takes over. And so I began to journey to the underworld to find the root cause of Joyce's housing instability and hopefully a cure. And here is what I find out. At the heart of Joyce's wound, I discover that she was unwanted at birth, and as a child had been abused by her brother while her parents looked the other direction. As an adult, Joyce had become her elderly father's unpaid caregiver in exchange for a place to live. When he died, a friend of hers invited her to live with him rent-free, but she paid for it by cleaning, cooking, doing computer repair, being available to listen to him and offer emotional support, until one day he left an envelope on her plate with an eviction notice. As I investigated the beliefs that had led to Joyce's particular situation at present, I glimpsed the larger collective problem. Being a girl schooled in feminine expectations, Joyce learned how to be keenly aware of the emotional needs of others. She learned how to do work traditionally considered women's work, how to cook and clean, to remember birthdays, to write thank you notes, to keep track of missing things, to process others' anger and pain and frustration. She had learned to be a sounding board, to offer comfort, to mediate conflict, to be always available to listen. Shamans believe that we are all avatars for the collective. One person's disease is an expression of the larger imbalance existing in the collective. Whether women give birth or not, we are all trained and expected to be mothers. Selfless, all-powerful, uncomplaining. Expected to do all of this emotional labor without pay or acknowledgement. This is normal. Like so many women, Joyce had to trade emotional labor for a place to live. That was the price of survival. And she wasn't the only one. It was late November, and as the days grew shorter and I made the journeys into the underworld, I could feel the ground under me shifting. There was a power within me growing. Healing never looks like what we expect. We hope it will be steady improvements, a speedy recovery, life returning quickly back to normal. More often, though, a true healing requires that everything fall apart. Sometimes healing is initiated by unseen events that leave you without any of your own coping mechanisms. Nothing you've tried before works. Sometimes healing takes the form of a disaster. From a place of relative stability, I thought I could offer Joyce a life raft. Instead, I felt myself being pulled down into murky waters as my own housing situation and the stability I had known began to quickly fall apart. This has been the case of the missing home. Stay tuned to find out what happens next.